Hey there, and welcome to a quick video where I'm going to take you through some stretching. So these are stretches that I would recommend for runners, triathletes, cyclists, anybody who's using their legs, and we'll also do a little bit of upper body. So main one for most of us is our quads. Most of us tend to be quad dominant. We use our quads a lot more than we use the back side of our body, and therefore we end up with our quads feeling very tight. This is my go-to stretch if you can, if you don't have any knee issues. So putting my knee down on the ground, gently squeezing my glutes forwards, making sure that I'm not tipping out to the front and I'm not pushing too far out like that, but just keeping nice and neutral pelvis, gently squeezing the glute forwards to get a stretch into my quad there. Definitely put a cushion or something underneath to protect the knee. As you get more flexible, you should be able to take that knee in closer to the thing behind you. It's called the couch stretch. A couch is ideal because it's quite low. If you take the cushions off, you can just hook the foot over there. So you're gently squeezing forwards, feeling that stretch down the front. If it feels really tight, then you'll need to take the knee further out to release it slightly so that you're not in such a tight position. Obviously, you're going to do that on both sides until that starts to release. Now that's one option for your quads. If you don't like kneeling on the ground, or that for whatever other reason that's not an option, you can do your quads just lying on your front and then taking one leg behind you, pulling the foot in towards your bum, making sure you push that hip down towards the ground. As I show you this stretch, we're going to do this standing up in a second. Note the position that I'm in. So the leg, this thigh is completely parallel, in a straight line with the rest of my body. My hip is down towards the ground. So I don't want to be doing this stretch if my hip's coming away. If it is, then don't bring the foot so close in. You can put a towel around your foot or something if you need to give you that pull in. So that's version 2 of a quad stretch, lying on the ground. Now obviously if I'm out for a run or something and I don't want to be lying on the muddy floor, then I can go in for a standing option. Hold on to something to balance if you need to. Take that foot behind you, and again, look, I've got the thigh in line with the body. I'm not pulling it back to there. It's not out the front here. My knees are pretty much close together, and I'm still doing the same as I was doing on the ground, pushing the hip forwards to get that stretch into the quad. Now, in terms of how long I'm holding it for, all of these stretches you're going to do based on feel. If it doesn't feel tight, as long as you've checked your positioning and made sure that you are stretching the right bit, if it doesn't feel tight, you don't need to stretch it. If it feels really tight, you'll need to do it for longer. So it's really going to depend on you and on how it feels that particular day. So that's 3 different versions for your quads. Onto your glutes. My favourite one is lying on my back, foot onto the opposite thigh, drawing the leg in. So I'm getting a stretch into the bent knee side here, stretching into my glutes. I can move that stretch around by pulling the toe towards my knee, by pulling my thigh that I'm sort of guiding myself with out away from the stretching side. So I'm now getting much more of a stretch through there. So I can move that around and move the foot around to stretch or to change where that stretch is. I can also do a standing version of that, again if I'm out on my run, dropping down into it, getting that stretch there. With all of these, as I say, you've got to hold it for long enough. So if you're somebody who kind of goes to a run, you often see people going to park run or getting onto a treadmill, and they'll literally be walking along and they'll do the, and that's it. That is achieving nothing. Save yourself 5 seconds of your time. Don't worry about doing that. If you want to do the stretching, if it's going to have a point, you need to hold it for long enough. So probably 30 plus seconds, holding it in there. We're trying to stretch the muscle. We're trying to restore it to its prior to exercise state. So we're trying to lengthen it back out, get rid of that tightness in the muscle. So you have to hold it for long enough to actually produce a change in the muscle. So that's my standing glute stretch. If you were trying to target into your piriformis, those of you who know that you need to will know about that. You can go into your pigeon pose. So I've got my leg out in front of me, and then work to your range of mobility. If you can get all the way down to the floor, brilliant. If you can't, then again, just work to your range of mobility. So now I'm getting a slightly more acute stretch into a very defined area of my glutes there. And again, I would do that on both sides. With all the stretches, try and think about breathing in, and then as you breathe out, trying to get a little bit deeper into the stretch. So imagine targeting your breath towards the tightness, and as you breathe out, feeling that stretch just loosen out, or feeling the muscle loosen out. Into hamstrings. So if I'm at home, I'll probably just do it kneeling down. Again, you might want something underneath your knee. Kneeling down, leg out in front, and then bending over, and now I'm getting a stretch into the hamstring there. I can turn my foot out to the side, so it's pointing that way. I can put it into the middle, and that's just changing where the stretch is. It's all in my hamstring, but it's changing where it is. So with this stretch, you need to make sure you're leaning forwards to get the stretch. I'll show you the version outside. So if you're outside, you could just do it on a park bench, foot up there, and again, leaning forwards. Now the key thing with this stretch, whether it's the one on the ground or with my foot up on the bench, is that I want to keep my knee soft. So it's not about locking out the knee. I can feel a burning sensation down the back of my leg there. And to do that, that is not me stretching my hamstring. That is neural, that is nerves. So it's not about getting that stretch across the back of the knee. It's about really targeting the hamstring, so the back of the upper leg. So keep the knee soft, bend forwards to get that stretch. I wouldn't particularly go for the standing, touching your toes type stretch. A lot of people go for that as a kind of measure of how tight your hamstrings are. Often you're just putting too much stretch again onto the back of the knee. When you're doing that, you might be hyperextending the knee. So again, I wouldn't be particularly touching my toes as a way to stretch my hamstrings. So what else have we done? Into calves. Now for my calves, there's two stretches. We all know this one, the calf stretch, where I'm stretching the back of my leg at the back there. I'm getting that stretch into the head of the gastroc, this big muscle at the top there. So we're familiar with that. Remember, gastroc has two heads. So we can try with the toe facing forwards, but we can try with the toe facing to the left and to the right. That's going to get slightly into different parts of that gastroc muscle there. But then we also need to think of soleus, which is the muscle that's kind of down in our lower calf here. So for that, if you imagine this was a wall, I'm going to take my knee in towards the wall. So imagine this is the wall here. I'm pushing my knee in towards it. I'm making sure that my foot is facing forwards as I push my knee in. And I can feel that stretch down here, so much lower in the calf muscle. This is also my test to check that you've got enough ankle mobility. How far can you get that foot out from the wall and still get the knee into the wall without the heel coming up? And without your ankle clicking too much, don't know if you just heard that. So this is pushing the knee into the wall. Yes, I can feel it a bit in my quad here because I'm essentially doing a single leg squat, pretty poor one. So I can feel it working in my quad, but hopefully what you're feeling is that stretch into that lower soleus, lower part of the calf. So again, doing it on both sides. Making sure that as I do it, my foot is facing straight. I'm almost thinking of pushing my knee out. So imagine pushing my knee out over my little toes. It's not going all the way out there, but our preference normally is to collapse on the inside there, so going over our big toe. So think about just pushing the knee out slightly towards the little toes as you go forwards. So that is most of the main muscles that we'd be wanting to stretch in terms of our lower body. There's obviously lots of other little muscles involved, but in terms of the main muscles. The other thing which I completely left out and must include because it's my big obsession is your hip flexor. So we did our quads there. We also need to make sure that we get into our hip flexor. Now our hip flexor, one of our hip flexors is part of our quad, so we were stretching it there, but now we want to make sure that we're definitely just focusing on the hip there. So when we had our knee up at the back, you can also do that stretch by holding the foot there. It's a lot harder to balance though. So when we had our foot up at the back, we were getting the whole of the quads, and now I'm getting just into the hips. So pushing forwards, drawing up at the front, getting into the hips there. Holding it again for as long as I need to actually get that change in state. If you think how many hours you spend sitting And then if you're just going to go, oh, yeah, stretch my hip flexors, that's it. That's nothing. People talk about doing 1 minute for every 10 minutes sitting. There's lots of different ways you can sum up the numbers, but definitely spending enough time loosening up these guys here so that we can then start to engage our glutes. Remember, our hips and our glutes are a pair, and if we're too tight in our hips, we struggle to engage our glutes. So that's most of our lower body. Also thinking about some of the upper body, we need to have good upper body mobility. We don't want to be too tight across the chest, partly just in terms of our general posture. If we spend most of our time on our phone, over our laptop like this, we end up very tight here and forget to engage the muscles at the back. Again, these guys and these guys act as a pair, so if we're too tight here, we start to lose the ability to engage the muscles at the back. So we need to release the muscles at the front, but also for our running, we need to have good rotation. We don't want to be too tight through there. So first of all, thinking about lying on one side, taking our top hand, either pinning our top leg, or I like to put my hand just in front of my knees there so I can feel if this top knee slips at all. From there, I'm taking this top arm out and I'm opening out, and I'm going to carry on talking to you, but normally you would face away with the hand. And then I'm trying to get that arm down to the floor. I'm not going to force it though. You could also do it there and just opening out. So I'll show you now, facing away, and I'm trying to get that shoulder down to the floor, making sure that this knee here doesn't slip. So using that hand there to make sure that that knee isn't slipping. So you're going to feel that in lots of different places. You might feel it lower back, you might feel it in the arm, you might feel it across the chest. Certainly should be helping to open out the chest. Then from there, I'm going to go into taking that arm out, reaching as far forwards with my top arm as I can, realising I've got too much stuff in the way, making a big circle all the way around. And again, I'm feeling that through here, through the arm. Keeping the fingers down to the ground if you can, if you haven't left a chair in the way. Fingers all the way down to the ground if you can, but not forcing it. With any of these things, you don't want to be forcing it, you just want to be gently opening it up. So this is a little bit more mobility than stretching, but I would certainly do this just to loosen up the joints before running, getting that mobility through the upper back, certainly before swimming. If I then want to add in a little bit more of a stretch into the chest, I can either go hands onto my hips and pushing the elbows together there, getting that stretch into the chest, or I can go facing a wall, arm out at about 90 degrees, and then just opening out away from there. So I'm feeling that stretch into the front of the chest there. I don't want to go too hard. This is quite a hard stretch, but just gently easing into it. So that is probably some of the main stretches to be doing, thinking about that upper body mobility, thinking about getting that movement back in. One more, talking about body mobility and getting the movement back in. We must have that upper body mobility there. So one of my favorites is either arm up and reach through, so getting that rotation into the upper back, or if you want to add it in, doing your hip flexors at the same time, you can be thinking about with my left glute, I'm pushing forward, so I'm getting a stretch at the front of my hip there, and then I can add in that same opening out. So I'm getting that upper body mobility, I'm getting a bit of a stretch into the hamstring, and I'm getting that hip mobility. Brilliant if you can get all three at the same time. Not so good if you end up compromising one while you're focusing on the other. So it depends whether you can get all of that going together. I've just slightly put together mobility and stretching there. There is a difference. Stretching would be the thing that you're holding for around 30 seconds. Stretching is where we're stretching into the muscle. We're trying to get the muscle to relax or stretch out. Mobility is where we're loosening up the joint. We're getting more movement at the joint. They are different. I would say if you're feeling constricted in an area and if something's helping to loosen it up, don't worry too much about the difference between the stretching and the mobility, but do be aware what you're trying to achieve. So when I'm stretching, I'm holding it, I'm getting that muscle to gently lengthen out, I'm holding it for about 30 seconds plus. When I'm doing mobility, it's more just about getting that movement into the joint. But if you're doing one or the other and it makes you feel better, it feels like you've loosened up your body and more able to do exercise afterwards, there you go. In terms of when you do each, mobility is traditionally what you do before exercise. So again, it's getting that movement at the joint. Stretching is more what we would do after exercise. It doesn't have to be done straight after exercise. It can be just, you know, in the evening or whatever. It's about restoring those muscles to their pre-exercise length. So long as you're getting them in when you need them, if something feels tight, if you're loosening it off, adding in some foam rolling as and when. You could, there's an ongoing debate about whether you should stretch or roll. I will generally say whichever one you prefer doing, because it's the one you're more likely to do, or the one that you feel you get more benefits from. I know there's certain things that I just don't feel much benefit from stretching at all. I feel that they really work when I roll. Other parts of my body that I know that I need to, I either prefer or I get better results from stretching. So find what works for you, and more importantly than anything, find the thing you are going to do, because doing it is far more important than what is theoretically best for you. Okay, I hope that was useful, and I look forward to seeing you soon.